All right. Well, now it takes it's an Arlen Wednesday. Yesterday, Arlen, I was confused. I know you told me that today was going to be the day of your appearance, but it's just so ingrained in me now that Tuesday is Arlen Day that it's hard for me to keep it straight.
I'm unpredictable.
You're pretty predictable, but I'll give you that one. Everything okay with your teeth?
Yeah, they're still being worked on, and I'm okay. I could chew now. I could, I'm all right. Thanks
Good
for
to
asking.
know. Good to know that's important. And how are things in the Green Mountain State, the state of Bernie Sanders?
Absolutely. In fact, I got a new parakeet, and I named it Bernie because because the bird is a Vermont bird. So what could be better than Bernie Bird?
That's a good name, right? Because also the bird that landed on his shoulder, I guess, is also evoked by your nickname. We've got Arlen, by the way. He looks really good. You can see how high, there's very little pixelation, but we're still having a little audio issues. We've discussed this. We're going to work on getting it even better. But Arlen, you absolutely look much better, clearer than you have in the past. So we're grateful for that improvement.
Oh, by the way, Hal, I'm going to be,
yes.
Nancy and I are going to be going to Maine for a few days, starting Saturday, just to get away and, see some other parts of the country. So you're pretty familiar with that state, aren't you?
Well, it's a big change, being ironic here. Not that big a difference between Maine and Vermont. You do have New Hampshire between you, but about the same latitude and similar, if not, certainly not identical, but similar landscape with a lot of mountains topography, a lot of mountains, rivers. So I don't think you'll find it that big a sea change for you. But yeah, it's very pretty. Are you going to be on the coast, which Vermont obviously doesn't have, or will you be in the mountains?
Nancy wants to go see Campobello, where FDR would go for breaks, and so I'm not sure exactly where that is, but one thing
Campobello is
Maine,
an island. Campobello is a small island that's actually in Canada. It's just over the border. If you go along the coast of Maine on 95, I believe, all the way past Bar Harbor. I'm giving a little geography lesson here, and then you get to Canada. That's kind of a southern kind of part of Canada that's where it dips south. And apparently it's very nice. Actually, my sister and cousin both have been spending a lot of time in that area. St. Andrews is one of the towns, too, that's in New Brunswick. So it should be very, very nice. I think you'll enjoy it.
I think I might need a passport from what you say, if it's in Canada.
Campobello, I believe, is, in fact, I know it's in Canada, and now you do need a passport. I'm not sure. Maybe that's like considered a Guernsey Island type situation. I'm not really sure. I'll look that up. But that sounds like a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to hear about it. I've always wanted to go to those maritime provinces and never had that opportunity. So enjoy yourself. We will talk about Gaza, where there's hopefully going to be some kind of a ceasefire. The Israeli killing machine has definitely ramped down its activities over the past few days, Arlen, with just 10 people killed. I hate to say just, but compared to numbers that have often been the 100s on a daily basis, 10, I guess, is a step forward. And the toll now, 67,200. I'm not going to get into the terms of the deal that's being negotiated right now. I'll talk more about that tomorrow. With Arlen, we have some other topics that he wanted to focus on, and we're still, clearly the situation is so fluid in Israel and Gaza. It's hard to come to any conclusions. But I will give my quick slide, Arlen, and then we'll continue. Since October 7, Israel and the U.S., October 7th, 2023, the U.S. have killed, and the number, according to AA and Anadolu Ajansi, is 67,183, 10 more yesterday, and 13,580 during the Trump regime with his work with Netanyahu there. So, Arlen, one of the factors that apparently is pushing Trump to really leverage the power of the United States to cajole Israel to stop killing Gazans is Trump wants that Nobel Peace Prize. Apparently, 3 of the 5 judges have said no under no circumstances. If he somehow manages to, push through this deal, would you award him the Nobel Peace Prize?
It would be hard to if that actually was resolved. I'm not sure it's going to be resolved. Hamas has to weigh in, and they haven't agreed to everything. And is Netanyahu going to step back? It's hard for me to see him step military. Ooh. But yeah, I think you're right. Trump wants that Nobel Peace Prize, and this is his ticket, he thinks.
Yeah, I said this yesterday. I would certainly not, under any circumstances, vote for him to receive that award. I think his argument is akin to that of a serial killer saying, hey, I've stopped killing, so therefore, I deserve a prize. I wouldn't give him anything for that, but I still hope it happens. That said, you're right. The terms are very seem to me to be put pretty much the entire burden on Hamas, although Israel has to agree ultimately to withdraw its military from the region. I don't know what kind of safeguards or enforcement mechanisms are involved. It seems like Israel is very reluctant, though, to agree to that. So this may all, in the end, come to naught, but we do welcome any pause in the killing.
Yeah, it's just been going on for so long, and people are desperate to see it end. And yet, some of these forces have a lot going. They're used to what they're doing, and they're not unhappy about having to stop fighting. So like everything else that we've had before, it's very iffy.
Yeah, and even if there is some kind of a ceasefire, obviously. The fear is that at any moment Israel could simply resume its occupation, its invasion, and simply renege on the terms to which it had agreed. So it's all very, very scary. Continues to be so. Moving to the domestic matters, the big story, I think, maybe I'm missing something, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the big story would seem to be the continuing shutdown, Arlen, and your thoughts. You pleased with what the Democrats are doing? Do you feel like they have a strategy in place? What's your sense of where we are with this government shutdown based on a significant, very high, the debt, the government debt surpassing a milestone?
Well, I think the Democrats are doing about the only thing they can do. I think it makes sense, to concentrate on healthcare. Everybody understands healthcare and how, important it is. And so they have a chance at least to get out their message that, hey, we're for healthcare. If we're elected, you'll get some healthcare. So, I think they got the right strategy, and according to the polls, it's working.
It certainly does appear to be. Let's go to the CNN Situation Room with Harry Enton.
All right, Arlette Saenz, thank you so much. I want to bring in our CNN chief data analyst, Harry Enton, to look at the polling and this blame game. I mean, you're hearing these messaging wars, right, Harry? Walk us through what the numbers are saying about who Americans are blaming right now.
Yeah, I just saw the speaker up there trying to place the blame on Democrats, but I got to be honest with you, you look at the polling data and they simply put not buying Speaker Johnson's arguments. What are we talking about? Well, why don't we just blame more for the 2025 shutdown? Normally, when you see Republican on the screen, that's a good thing because they're leading. But in this case, it's a bad thing because more Americans are blaming him for the shutdown. And you can see it's a sweep across the board. You look at the New York Times poll, blame Republicans more by 7 points. How about the CBS poll, came out yesterday? Blame Republicans more by 9 points. How about the Marist University poll? Blame Republicans more by 12 points. And then the Washington Post poll takes the cake, blaming Republicans more by 17 points. You average it all together, and we're talking about a double-digit margin in which more Americans are blaming the Republicans than the Democrats. Now, perhaps that shouldn't be so surprising to students of history. Why? Because we've had a number of shutdowns in the past. And which party almost always, or basically always, seems to get blamed? It's the Republican Party that always seems to get blamed, whether it's the 95, 96 shutdowns, 2013 or the 2018, 2019 shutdowns. And more importantly, what I think is so important is we are still at the beginning of this shutdown, right? What happens right now in the polling may not necessarily hold going forward. But historically speaking, what we've actually seen is that the party that gets blamed at the start of the shutdowns, 95, 96, 2013, 2018, 2019, is the same party that gets blamed by the end of the shutdown. So at this point, more Americans are blaming the Republicans than the Democrats. And historically speaking, those margins have tended to hold.
Well, I'm going to pause it while we got to the end of it anyway, Arlen. I want to leave Harry on screen for just a moment more, but my analysis of that is the reason Americans blame Republicans is because these shutdowns occur as a direct result of Republicans slashing taxes on the wealthy, which most Americans want. They want the rich to pay higher taxes than they do. Republicans slash those taxes. And Republicans also cut essential safety net programs like, in this case, we're talking about Medicare and Medicaid. So, of course, Americans are going to blame them. They're saying, you're trying to cut benefits for us, and you're doing that to give huge tax cuts for the billionaire class. Doesn't this kind of tell Democrats that these are the fights they should be fighting across the board, year after year, week after, month, decade after decade?
Yes, absolutely. You're right, Hal. But one thing that bothers me, though, is the Democratic popularity, if it increases, going to mean anything? Because right now, it's hard to imagine Trump and the MAGA people backing down off leading the country. I mean, is there going to be a 2026 midterm? A lot of people are wondering about that. So, it's all rather iffy, but I think the Democrats at least are doing the best thing they can do right now.
Well, even if there isn't, if somehow there's going to be an end to even somewhat free elections next year, that seems to be all the more reason for Democrats to fight tooth and nail now to rein in the Republicans, because they may never have this opportunity in the future. The other point I would make is that what some analysts have been saying is 2026, we likely will have contested elections, but we may not in 28, especially if the House remains in Republican hands. It's not hard to imagine Speaker Johnson refusing to certify a Democratic victory in 28. So it's really important to have a Democrat in the Speaker's chair as of 28. Now, I hope that if that happens, I certainly hope it's not Hakeem Jeffries, but I think that's a legitimate fear, right? Is that Mike Johnson might reject the voters.
Yeah, it's quite possible. It's going to be whatever Trump wants. If Trump feels like might lose something, then he's going to obviously, push back on any possible elections. It may come earlier than that with martial law. We don't know. But right now, the Republicans seem to have everything going for them, all the advantages. The Democrats can't do anything to them. In fact, there's nobody that can or is willing to stop Trump doing whatever he wants to do right now.
Well, we're seeing right now, the shutdown is impacting on Trump's popularity. Most Americans, or at least the plurality of those expressing a preference, think the Democrats are right and the Republicans are wrong. Even Trump supporters want those Obamacare subsidies retained, despite the deep cuts implemented by Republicans earlier this year. And at that time, of course, Chuck Schumer went along with it, right? Chuck Schumer did not fight back, but now Democrats are pushing back. Do you have any confidence in them standing firm? If I were the leader, if I were advising them, I would say under no circumstances concede 1 inch. I think they should have put even more demands on the table. This is what the American public want. Trump got elected, in my opinion, because Democrats didn't fight for the American people. If they show Americans that they will fight for them, they can win.
Yeah, well, I think the Democrats, like I said, are doing the right thing, showing that they care about health care and they're willing to back it up. Now, if they somehow backed away from the Republicans who got scared, I think they'd lose just about their entire base. Nobody wants the Democrats to back down to Trump anymore. So, and this is an opportunity that they could actually make some progress.
Is this also an opportunity, Arlen, for the Democrats perhaps to win back some of those famed blue-collar Obama to Trump voters, working class, Latinos, and black men who may have, to the surprise of some, voted for Trump?
Well, if it's a legitimate election, that may be so. I'm just not sure it's going to be legitimate. But, if the Democrats could make some kind of, if they could get some power somewhere, either in the House or the Senate, things could really change a lot. I just don't know if that's going to happen or not.
All right, Arlen Grossman with us. This is Halitics. Don't forget, please do subscribe if you haven't yet done so. And Arlen, I've been doing these shorts. I was under direct order from a consultant I've been working with a little bit to do short form videos. I've done them. They continue to do those. Those do seem to perform pretty well. I think people can't necessarily watch a full hour of Halitics, but they can watch 30 seconds or 60 seconds. And so we're going to continue that. Again, don't forget, though, if you're watching now, to click subscribe, click like. Any commentary of any sort is welcome. And we would also urge you to join us on Halitics. And I've really made the effort to reduce the kind of, I guess, mean-spirited comments, the personal attacks. I just cannot have those. They really upset me. So we don't have those anymore, pretty much, although maybe it's gotten a little more boring, unfortunately, on the flip side. But you can always comment at Halitics. Yeah, right, Arlen, maybe a little drier than it used to be on Halitics on Facebook.
So I don't think people have really stopped doing the things that you want them to stop doing, but maybe they'll get the message. And
I'm seeing less of the. Really, is there still a lot of harsh stuff on there?
I got some criticism. It wasn't
Did you? Well, share it with me because I miss things sometimes. So if there's something that's over the top, personal, you can criticize arguments, but don't criticize individuals. If I missed it, please let me know. Or now I got to go back and look and see what he's talking about. 240-242-5646 if you want to join us. 240-242-5646. And just to get back to the thumbnail I used to start the program, Arlen, that was like the top 4 Dems in terms of popularity, in terms of the likelihood, I guess, that they could be nominated for president. So I put those 4 up there, and I use the caption. I want to just explain this a little bit. I think now's the time in the program why I use this thumbnail. The leaders America needs now, and that's in a question mark afterwards. We have from left to right, and that is done deliberately. As far as I can tell, AOC would be the farthest to the left of those top 4 candidates. Maybe Gavin Newsom is next leftist, and that kind of tells you that the other 2 are not to the left at all. Harris, and then I guess Pete would be the furthest to the right of the 4. The reason I asked the question, the leaders America needs now, in a review of Kamala Harris's new book, 107 Days, the New Yorker reviewer says after completing the book, despite her desire to like Harris, to sympathize with Harris, she can't help but conclude Harris is not the leader America needs now. Your reaction to that statement, and do you think we'll go through the book. I'm going to go through the review, but I want your thumbnail here. Your reaction to that statement, and also, are any of those 4 we put up there people you think, a person or people we could look to as true leaders of this country?
Well, I think the most obvious one is Gavin Newsom. I mean, he's most in the news. He's the popularity polls among Democrats. He seems to be smart. He seems to know how to campaign and what to say, and he's got a sense of humor. So he's got a lot going for him, and I think that's great. Now, AOC, I wanted to mention too, because before the show, we were talking about Bernie doesn't accept money from corporations and PACs and all that, and AOC is the same way. She doesn't either. So I like her a lot, but I don't think I'd rather have Newsom be the actual candidate.
Well, there are a lot of concerns that have been raised about self-dealing by Newsom. He is close to lobbyist, especially in the healthcare industry. He has not necessarily championed progressive causes. I mentioned the healthcare situation, especially because he was clear that he would not support a single payer. He didn't say he would necessarily veto it, but he was not going to champion, he was not going to push it. And that may have been a big problem in terms of getting Medicare for all passed in the state. I believe the previous governor actually vetoed a plan that would lead us in that direction. Maybe it was Newsom. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But in terms of the past nominee, the concern there is that she just ran a weak campaign and has shown some vindictiveness in her book. Do you think it's fair to say she should not have, she's not the leader America needs now? Or is Trump such an existential threat in your view that that's kind of a waste of time to even spend on Harris at all?
Well, she had her chance, even though not a very good chance. And no, she would not be a good candidate right now. I think, like I said, I think Newsom would be good. And I noticed Newsom, he does have a lot of left-wing credentials. He was the one that, allowed gays to marry in California and so on. And lately, he seems to be moving a little bit to the right on purpose by putting conservatives on his podcast and everything. Like, he knows the way the wind is blowing, you might say. So I think he's smart, and I think he'll know what to do.
Yeah, my view has always been that the way Democrats win is they fight for working people. And I just don't see that in Newsom. I just haven't seen him as a leader who can go on stage and say, I am running for president because I want to make life better for you. Now, people talk about the Trump ad where he played, the ominous music, and Kamala Harris supports trans surgery or whatever for prisoners. She's for they, them. Trump is for you. And I thought that was a very effective ad because Trump said, I'm for you. Trump said, Trump is for you. We need a candidate who can, I believe, or I will vote for, and I certainly don't think any of the Democrats meet this test, who can plausibly say, pointing to their record, I will fight for you. I will not fight for corporations. I will not fight for billionaires. I don't believe Gavin Newsom can say that plausibly.
Well, he has a lot of time, and I think he can say it. And right now, Trump is saying is acting the exact opposite. He is helping the rich. I think the economy is starting to get worse. He definitely is laying off. A lot of people are getting laid off now. So it'll be pretty obvious that Trump is not for the working people.
Oh, yeah. Trump is awful. And the fact that he was able to win in the last election, I think, tells you just how badly people look at Democrats. Not that they think so highly of Trump, who did not get over 50% of the vote, although he did win a plurality of the vote. But the fact that so many Americans just could not see themselves voting for Harris, I think tells you that they don't trust her. They didn't view her as an ally. They don't view the party as an ally. And I think they're right not to view the party as an ally.
Yeah, the Democrats have a lot to do to get people to trust them. But I think, like we've talked about, if they stick to things like healthcare and jobs and, food and all those kind of things that Trump doesn't really care about, then I think they can show they are a good contrast for the American people.
And I think this was kind of actually a scathing review by Amy Davidson Sorkin in the pages of the New Yorker, just published a couple of days ago. Actually, today, I see 10/8 is the date I see. But I think it was actually posted a couple days ago. She talks about how her campaign staff actually threw a party for her on her birthday, which included festooning her campaign plane with streamers and presenting her with a German chocolate cake, her favorite. So her campaign going out of her way for them. The response from Harris was extremely problematic in my view. She was very angry. This is all based on her book, what Sorkin relates. She didn't like the fact that she was being reminded that she was 60. She no longer, mentions her birthday, her years, her age in her birthday celebrations anymore. She didn't like the fact that it was there. And so she stepped right in the middle of the balloon. And apparently it didn't go over well. People were, felt like she was very angry and upset about the whole event, which was supposed to be a feel-good moment. And she gives other examples of sort of a small-minded or pettiness in Harris, the way she criticizes other Democrats, including those who could run for who might be running for office, either in 26 or 28 for president. So a lot of negativity. What struck me, Arlen, more than the personal stories, the anecdotes, is that neither the reviewer, Sorkin, nor Harris ever mentions policy. They don't talk about any kinds of legislation that could be pushed or changes in policy. Do you understand why I've complained about this over and over to you practically every show. What the hell is the matter with the Democrats that they don't recognize that they lose because they don't talk about policy? Trump does talk about policy. You may hate his policies. You may think they're awful. He may go back on them all the time, but he does talk about policies.
Well, not every one of them is going to talk about policies, especially the way that you would like. But as far as Harris goes, there's no groundswell for her. I don't think she would be a very good candidate at all. But somebody like Newsom or another, prominent governor would probably, be able to talk about policy, because I think a lot of Democrats, especially the progressive side, really feels that's the only way we're going to get back into power, because, by not talking about those working class policies, we lost the election pretty badly.
Well, and if you win, but you don't talk about working class policies, then we still lose the election. It doesn't really matter who's in power, which party is named after the winner. If their policies are pro-billionaire, pro-military, pro-fossil fuel extractor, and not pro-people, pro-life, it doesn't matter. They're both bad, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I don't think the Democrats are dumb enough to have the same policy and ideas as Trump about, helping the rich and hurting the poor and all that. They're smart enough to know what are good policies that would help people, consider them to be a working class party. Especially, somebody like Newsom, very smart. He'll figure that out.
Well, he hasn't as governor of California. We've already done about examples where he has clearly sided with the billionaire class. The Democrats try to have it both ways. They present themselves as working class supporters, and every now and then they'll throw a bone, but on balance, they continue to defer to the wishes of their billionaire backers.
Well, I think, as far as Newsom goes, he was governor. He was not running for president when he did a lot of the things that he did. But I think if you look at his overall record, it's pretty progressive, and he could adjust it as he campaigns and goes along. He's a smart guy, like I say, and he knows which way the wind blows, I think.
I think American people really want someone who doesn't know which way the wind blows, but is going to fight for them. Not because this is what the latest poll shows, or not because they're trying to win office, but because they sincerely believe that the system is rigged against them, and they're right. So I think, shading it as though, well, he'll figure it out. I think what most Americans want, honestly, are somebody that they believe is truly sincere in their desire to make life better for working people. A lot Americans don't like Trump. I think they did believe he was sincere in at least what he claimed he was going to try to do.
Yeah. He never, tells the truth about anything, but that they've thought, based a lot on, Fox News and a lot of the media sources from the right that tell a certain kind of story. But really, the only way, and I agree with you, the only way that Democrats are going to win is to become the people's, working class party, get to be on the side of the unions and everything else that will help working people. Because right now, people are losing jobs, they're hurting, inflation is remaining up. And I think the Democrats have a lot to run on. that could be a lot different than what Trump is doing.
Well, again, Trump is kind of the floor, so hopefully they can be a little bit better than he is, or not quite as awful as Trump. 240-242-5646 if you want to join us. 240-242-5646. And again, what Sorkin highlights is kind of these petty points that Kamala Harris tries to score in her book. She talks about how she couldn't run with a gay white man as a black woman. She needed somebody who wasn't, some kind of minority like gay that would be a problematic for her. She comments on Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, asking about how many rooms were in the vice president's mansion. She talks about Mark Kelly maybe not being willing to take orders from her, but she never talks about policy. And I get that. That's who she is. But what I find more problematic, actually, because we know who Kamala Harris is, but why can't the author, why can't the reviewer say, hey, at least note she doesn't seem to see policy as relevant? Because I think that's an incredibly important takeaway. To me, that's the biggest takeaway of all of her book, is there's no searching whether the Democratic policies and the policies she's championed are really good for working people or have made life better. And it seems to me that's what you should be focusing on if you want to win elections. You're running because I would hope you're running. You would say you're running because you want to make life better for the American people. And she doesn't ever say that, as far as I can tell, or talk about how she could have made life better. I don't know why Sorkin, to me, this is a media failure. The media should be pointing this out, and it doesn't. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
For one thing, you may be 100% for policy, but not every American is, and not every writer is. So, you have to think of other factors too. But nobody's really begging for Kamala Harris to be running for president. I don't think she would be very popular. And I just, after losing to Trump already, I don't see her as a reasonably possible candidate for the Democrats.
Well, I think the latest survey, and we talked about this too, I believe the latest survey shows her second to Gavin in terms of who the voters want for to be the president in 28, who the Democratic primary voters are going to select. She is second to Gavin.
Yeah, but it's 2025 now. 2028 is a long way away. So, I just don't think she's going to be one of the stronger candidates at that time. By the way, I wanted to bring something else up. I don't know if you had a chance to see Pam Bondi testifying before the senators. I think it was either yesterday or maybe it was this morning. She was talking back to the Democrats and criticizing them and going on the offensive when she's supposed to be answering questions. So, that was to me, the thing I think about the most is that if Trump and his people do something wrong or illegal, there's nobody there to stop them, because Trump controls the Justice Department. It's supposed to be independent, but Bonnie knows who she works for. So I don't know where the Democrats are going to find someone who will hold Trump accountable for all the crimes that he often does.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate situation. No question about it. Let's just hope again that Congress flips in 26, and then they'll be in a position to lead investigations, to issue subpoenas, and hold hearings. That's really what we need. And we don't have that. 240-242-5646 if you want to join us. I saw 7 people right now watching the video, so one of you should certainly join us, and the numbers may be higher. But yeah, these are terrible people, Arlen, and that's who we got. We got a conquistocracy. Speaking of, you mentioned Bondi. She works for Trump. Robert Reich, I think, makes a very, and he's pretty partisan. I criticize him for that, but you've featured his, maybe it's not his latest, but his latest is like came out probably 5 minutes ago. Because isn't he always posting he's got like 3 or 4 things out every day.
He's a frequent writer of articles. Yes.
Do you think he overdoes it? I mean, do you feel, because I will just say before I get your response, he's a really good writer. A lot of times I disagree with what he writes, or at least I think there are big holes in it. There are a lot of omissions, but he writes extremely with great clarity, and he does back up his points quite well. So I can't say he overwrites because he's not sloppy in his reasoning ever.
Yeah, he's a very smart person, and he's writing a lot. He's capable of doing that, and I think he's really scared about what's happening in our country. That's the impression I get just reading him. He sees how horrible things are and what Trump is doing, and so he's going all out to do what he can, to give a different kind of voice.
Yeah, and I think he's right. I think his concerns about Trump are very well founded. My problem with Reich has been for decades now that he sees the threat from the right side of the aisle extremely clearly, but is incapable of acknowledging the threat from his side of the aisle. And I think that's where he has let us down. Here we go. Trump's increasingly bizarre behavior can no longer be attributed to a calculated strategy. So Reich doesn't quite conclude Trump is demented. Do you think Trump is demented, or is he just a narcissist?
I think he's on the verge of demented if he isn't there already. I mean, he just talks crazy all the time. Nothing. A lot of what he says just doesn't make any sense at all, and most of it is lies. He makes up stories all the time. He's not rational at all. So I think there's something to that. But he's smart enough to know how to win and how to get the people on his side. The certain people that he nominates on his side. So he's certainly not dumb in that respect. But there's a lot of dementia, I think.
He has a certain level of calculated shrewdness, I would say, and his bullying techniques seem to have served him relatively well, but not the American public, obviously. Here's some of the receipts, the evidence that Reich provides to support to justify his concerns about Trump's dementia. He notes that, this is, by the way, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, Trump shared a video purporting to be a segment on Fox News in which an AI-generated deep-faked version of himself sat in the White House and promised that every American will soon receive their own MedBed card that will grant them access to new MedBed hospitals. And if you're like, what? You're not the only one. That's how we all kind of reacted. Here is CBS News, which, by the way, does a real nice job here, I think. And they're going to stop that because, CBS News now taken over by the scion of the Ellison family, David Ellison. Is very, very troubling. We lose yet another somewhat independent media voice. This was going to be full-on right-wing Zionist media going forward. But here's CBS News before the Ellison takeover.
President Trump causing some controversy after posting multiple AI-generated videos this week. And one was a deep fake of himself touting a fake medical breakthrough called MedBeds. It's a conspiracy that has roots in the QAnon movement. And it falsely claims the existence of cure-all medical beds and also claims that they are being kept from the public. Now, the president eventually did take that video down, but others showed Democratic leaders.
Yeah, so then they go on to show the one where he put that sombrero and fake mustache on Hakeem Jeffries, which was just so childish. And I mean, again, this is what we've come down to as a nation.
And by the way, it kind of bugs me sometimes when people express surprise or, oh, it's big news if Trump says this or that, because for the last at least 10 years, he's been doing that all the time. He's been making things up. He's been lying. He's been, distorting everything he can and promoting himself so much. I mean, this is typical Trump. This is how he operates. I don't see anything unusual or strange about it.
Doesn't that call into question the claim that he's demented, or that this is some sort of new behavior that reflects a more serious level of mental incapacity? Because if he's been acting like this forever, then that's just who he is. He's not demented. He's just complete horse's ass.
Well, yeah, he certainly is that. But he's, he even 10 years ago, he was pretty old, and he's got a family history of dementia. So, who knows when it started? He never was very bright to begin with, let's face it. But, so he just makes up strange stories and says strange things, and whatever he says, he believes.
From Reich, Trump announced Saturday, that would be a week ago Saturday, that he intends to send the U.S. military to Portland, Oregon, authorizing full force if necessary to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of our ICE facilities under attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. And of course, Reich points out that there's absurd. It's just not nonsensical. Protesters have been camping out, but on the sidewalks, but there's no violence and there's virtually no protests at all. So, Arlen, that said, you continue to express real concern that no one's standing up to Trump, that there's no reins on Trump. I agree the guardrails are low and they're not particularly firm, but there are some, to be fair. This is from the New Republic, pointing out that a Trump-appointed judge, Karen Immergut, I believe is how it's pronounced, Immergut, probably, in Portland, in Oregon, has said, no, you cannot send the National Guard. You cannot send California Guard into Portland. You're just making things up. So that is a guardrail. That is someone standing up to Trump, and he's not happy about it, but so far, she's winning.
I don't think that's that much help. There are a few good people, good judges like her, around, but how much power do they really have? And ultimately, the final power when it comes to justice is going to be the Supreme Court, and we know that's not the best place to go to get relief from Trump. So, there'll be some people that'll say, "Hey, you can't do that," and maybe he will, and maybe he won't do it. But they don't have the strength. How would she enforce her rules? I mean, is she going to ask the Justice Department to lock him up in jail? Of course not. So,
well, I mean, that's true. That's a real concern. In the end, the court doesn't have an army, doesn't have police, except their courtroom police, I guess, and courthouse police, but not nearly the same amount of power. But it could definitely trigger a constitutional crisis if Trump simply flouted deliberately in the teeth of a court order, violated it. That would be a pretty serious offense. And I do think there are a number of Republicans in Congress who would have problems with that, including, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has broken completely with the White House now on Israel, and also has broken with the White House when it comes to this budget fight. The Taylor Greene says, yeah, the Democrats have a point about restoring those cuts.
But I think Trump knows he could get away with anything. I think he's convinced himself, and he could do whatever he wants. He's convinced himself that he can. So, maybe there'll be a judge that'll say, hey, you can't do that, but without any means to enforce it, there may be a point that he comes to that when he says, oh, I don't have to listen to this judge.
Well, he could, but again, it could cause significant problems even with his base. We do see here the judge. I just want to read this from the New Republic. The judge's decision, Immergut notes, and remember, this is a Trump-appointed judge. This isn't some Democrat judge he can just completely dismiss. She's a highly respected Republican judge, which would also cause problems, I think, on the right. If he rejects completely what a Republican judge is saying, that will also probably frustrate some members of his base, even in Congress. But the judge held that his claim that there was some kind of rebellion in Portland was false, that in fact that claim of an emergency is untethered to the facts. That's very strong words. And the reason I quote those, Arlen, and even highlight them is because that is consistent with righteous, Fred, or whatever the right word is, that suggestion, implication that Trump may well be demented.
Yeah, but I think, the main problem here is, you mentioned the Republicans. I don't think the Republicans have shown any interest in going against Trump. That they've been pretty solid in supporting him. So I don't know what it would take to get some, more than at least a significant number of Republicans will say, "Hey, you got to stop this," because it hasn't happened yet.
Well, again, I gave you an example of one, at least with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it's true. But if the Democrats continue to hold the line and refuse to concede on the budget fight, there could well be some more Republicans who break ranks. I think we will see that, to be honest with you, Arlen. I hope we see that.
I'd be surprised. I just don't see it happening, but I'd like to see it happen.
Well, if they don't, then the Democrats absolutely have to use that in their campaigning next year and going into next year to paint the Republicans as completely out of touch with the needs of the American public and focus solely on massive tax cuts for the rich, regardless of how much pain that inflicts on everyday Americans. I think that's a winning strategy, to be perfectly honest with you. I hope they pursue it.
I hate to be so pessimistic, but like I said earlier, I'm not sure there's going to be an election if the Democrats are doing well. And, and also right now, the Republicans are doing all that they can to, in the Republican-led states to, gerrymander and get voters off the rolls and doing everything they can legally to stop Democrats from voting. So, you got to factor all that in.
Well, if you're that pessimistic, which is, no one wants to be pessimistic, but I certainly understand the concerns, excuse me, which I share greatly, Arlen. But does that suggest that we should just stop doing the podcast? I mean, if it's not going to make any difference anyway, if we're not going to be able to change the course of events, even, no matter what. And I wonder about this because, there are podcasters with millions of subscribers rather than 400 plus that I have. They're not impacting, it seems. They're not changing the dynamic. The great majority of Americans, this was a clip I played yesterday. I don't have it in the slide deck, but maybe I was going to play it for you, where Brianna Joy Gray makes the point that the American people have spoken when it comes to Israel. The American people have spoken when it comes to Medicare for all. And government simply doesn't respond to what the American people want. If that is the case, then, again, why do this? I mean, if we have a government that is wholly corrupt, is utterly unresponsive to the people, then, I guess what do you count? What do you call it? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just asking, what do we do then? What should we do?
Well, I think, we have to keep fighting back. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And his popularity is going down. So if you can get more American people against Trump and for the Democrats, I think, something could be done at some point. But and maybe it'll happen when, let's say, inflation gets so high and people have lost too many, so many jobs and the economy is falling apart, which he promised he would fix. Who knows? Then maybe some Republicans would break away.
Well, so you're saying that, I guess, if the Republican base abandoned Trump, then he might change his policies. Is that what you're claiming?
Well, certainly, although it's hard for me to see it happening, but if it happened, yeah. I mean, he thinks everybody's on his side, and he's the most popular person in the world. So if he began seeing a different story, who knows what he'll do.
All right, let me play this clip because this was something, and I did play this yesterday, but I guess I really want your take on it, Arlen. It's a little bit, it contradicts some of the points you've made in the past a little bit, and I'd like you to respond. So here we go. This is Brianna Joy Gray with James Fauntleroy.
And so
You're right.
I would say like everyone agree, but this is what's dark. Just like Medicare for all, okay, we won the awareness battle about Gaza. It took 2 years and almost 1 million dead people, but here we are. Everyone's aware and mad at Israel. But the sick part is that just like everyone liking and wanting Medicare for all, there's no relationship to whether we get anything like Medicare for all. Everybody hating Israel bears no relationship to American foreign policy. So there's like this thing where obviously we've all read the stories about all the different ways that they're investing in. They bought TikTok, they bought CBS, the bot armies, all the things. They paid $8,000 a tweet to these influencers, all the things.
Yeah.
I think very little that has to do with wanting to persuade people, but it's to maintain the fiction.
I want to stop it there. So I think that's right, because like Brianna Joy Gray says, it doesn't matter. You don't have to persuade people because you're not going to do what they want anyway. The government isn't going to respond to the will of the people anyway. But let me continue this.
That it's okay that we live in a democracy, that there's enough diversity of opinion out there that it doesn't make the government seem insane for choosing to continue its policy toward Israel.
All right. And not just Israel, but obviously towards, when it comes to Medicare for all, or even, and I know we just debated this, Arlen, or even when the Biden administration continued to pour billions and billions of dollars into the Ukrainian conflict, even though most Americans wanted it, didn't like it, didn't want us to keep doing that. So what's your response?
Well, she's right. There's a lot of things American people might believe, but are not going to happen. Their leaders are not going to give it to them. So I think there is certainly that makes some sense to me. I don't. Yeah.
Are you hopeless? Do you Charlie Kirk apparently really had changed his mind on Israel. He had been one of the most strongest Israeli assets in this country, going to college campuses and defending Israel's actions. At the very end, just before he was murdered, he stated in a tweet that he was breaking with Israel. There was something that we didn't know, but Candace Owens has shared. Do you think that would have made a difference?
I don't know what's going to make a difference because we are not a democracy anymore. Whatever Trump decides he wants to do, he's going to be able to do it up to now, and he's not going to get any help from Congress or this. So we're not going to get any help from Congress or the Supreme Court. So and like I say, Trump could do whatever he wants without any resistance, and that's the scary part for me. And again, the part about democracy, this country is controlled by billionaires and big corporations, and if they don't want something, it's not going to happen.
Arlen, you said you were going to Campobello. I believe that is in Canada. Maybe it sounds like you're going to want to stay there and not come back, given what things are like here. Which, by the way, I would totally. I would share. I share that sentiment.
Yeah, it is about as worse a time as I've ever seen, in my lifetime by far. And you're expressing the same kind of views, so you know how bad it is.
Well, why is it? What's happened? Why has this? You could point the finger at Trump, but under George W. Bush, we had torture. There have been these endless wars, even during the 60s Vietnam. I shouldn't say even during the 60s Vietnam. So a lot of terrible things have happened. What do you think has conspired to bring us to this low point, this low ebb?
Well, for one thing, I think the ultra-right has worked a lot harder than the Democrats. They've been pushing really hard with think tanks, with books and everything else. They're trying to get to the point that they're at right now, where they can do whatever they want. So that's a big part of it. And I think again, our Constitution doesn't really help much, and our Supreme Court doesn't help much, because money is everything. And as long as there's Elon Musk, getting to spend hundreds of $1 million, for Donald Trump, and then, we're just not a democracy anymore, and our voting doesn't seem to mean much anymore.
Well, you see that lovely, I guess, big old house there, that kind of lodge, that I believe is where the Roosevelts summered. That's part of Roosevelt Campobello International Park. It is indeed just over the line, Arlen, in New Brunswick, Canada. So I'm sure you'll be visiting that lodge. It should be very, very, I think they call it it's actually maybe identified as the Roosevelt Cottage. So would you call that a cottage? Apparently the Roosevelts, for them, that would be a cottage. I think it's kind of big for a cottage, but okay.
Well, that's a nice picture, Hal. In fact, it's so good, maybe I don't need to go there anymore.
You don't need to see it. You can see the frontier between Canada. There's the frontier, that dark line there. You will take, I think, a ferry. There may be a bridge from Lubeck to Campobello Island, Lubeck in Maine, and then you cross over and you'll be in Canada. And I would bring my passport. I would urge you to do that, because they've become very strict now. And it used to be you didn't need a passport. Now you do. Should be very, very nice visiting the cottage. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I see something else I want to see. Chocolate Cove. I got to check that out too.
I don't think there's chocolate there, though. I think it's just some other reason they call it that. I don't know. I really, but I will say there are big tides. Apparently that area, you get these massive tides rolling in very, very quickly at certain places. So you may get to enjoy that as well.
As long as they don't get too high and too hard.
Well, you got to be careful. You can't just be kind of standing like they're, dipping your little toesies in the water just when the tide reaches a certain point outside the bay, because then it just rushes and it gets above a certain level and then it just rushes right in. So I've never been there, like I said, but I've heard about this. It's very, very nice. All right, Arlen, anything else besides a trip to Canada? Is there something that kind of keeps you grounded, that makes you, and I mentioned off air, and I mentioned this on the program a couple of times. We have our new dog, Dolly, and she's very sweet. She's very skittish, anxious. She had a rough early start in her life, and so she's really she's nervous, and we're all patient with her and gentle with her, but I have to say she kind of takes me out of my head a little bit, and when I'm taking care of her, I'm not really thinking about all the world's problems to the same degree.
Yeah, no, that's great. Getting a dog, getting a pet, distracting yourself in other ways, hobbies, football, baseball, basketball, whatever, anything you can do to get away from 24-hour coverage of what's, all the awful things that are happening in Washington, D.C. I think it's essential. Otherwise, we're going to have an entire country that's depressed and anxious. And, so, yeah, you got to be careful about how much time you put into this.
So do you take, because, I go back and forth on this, partly because I worry that maybe Zoran is backing away a little bit from his ultra left policies, or as left as they can be in this country. Do you take some hope from his campaign, his apparently successful campaign? He continues to dominate, at least when it comes to the betting markets. Do you take some hope from him?
I do. I think we need more people like him. I think if he wins quite easily, people will pay attention. And, you've got AOC also in the same state. And if we could get some more, progressive leaders out there and people who are going to, take the same stands that Mondami does, and like you're advocating, policies that will help the working class, I think that'll make the Democrats look good.
Arlen, do you think the Democrats, whether they win either of the two houses of Congress, neither or both, do you think we will see new leadership? And that means that either Schumer, Jeffries, or both will be replaced.
I'd like to see that happen tomorrow. These guys are not doing as well as they should for the party, and you need somebody with a little more fire, with a little more progressive thinking, and those two are not those kind of people.
Do you think the party, as far as you can tell, You know, and let me just remind you, your district, I believe, is represented by Jimmy Panetta, obviously the son of Leon, who was certainly a centrist to center-right Democrat, far more conservative than his successor, Sam Farr. Knowing Leon Panetta's record, it's hard for me to see Jimmy Panetta being in the vanguard demanding change, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that doesn't matter. I mean, what do you think?
No, I haven't seen anything like that from Jimmy Panetta, any kind of a, progressive type streak in him and going on the attack. He's just not that type of person. And, there's many Democrats like that, unfortunately, who are willing to kind of lay back and try to keep things the way they are. And I think that's a terrible mistake. And that's why I think, somebody like Mondami winning and some other progressives winning, I think, are what the Democrats need.
Yeah, I will be honest. I have a lot of trouble seeing the Democrats rallying behind anyone besides Hakeem Jeffries in the House. And if they do, it would be someone like Hakeem Jeffries. I cannot see them embracing any true progressive. And I'll give a reason for that. So my Congress member is widely perceived as one of the most progressive in Congress, Jamie Raskin. And he has always praised Hakeem Jeffries. He has always talked about what a great leader Hakeem Jeffries is. He's never once suggested that his policies or his leadership is counter to the preferences of the progressive wing of the party, for example, when it most certainly is. So given that fact, I just can't see this happening. I can't see the leadership changing, which is one of the biggest reasons I'm so down on the party.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to have to be some change because, you look at the Republicans, their leaders are fiery and aggressive and strong. And then we look over the Democratic side and you got somebody older like Schumer, who doesn't seem that aggressive. The last time we had the funding issue, he backed down. And Hakeem Jeffries is not, at this point, even endorsing Mondani. So, I just think the Democratic leaders are certainly not looking good. And if the Democrats are smart, they'll change their leadership.
All right, Arlen, that's going to do it for all of my topics and my questions, but that gives you, as always, the final word. Anything you want to add, anything we missed, any issue that you feel you didn't get an opportunity to vet fully?
Well, there's one thing that people could look at, and that is the baseball playoffs and the World Series and NFL football. And I think it's important to, look at things like that and get your mind off of Trump for a little while during the day.
Arlen, you kind of lost me there because your and my San Francisco Giants didn't make the playoffs, and it's hard. The Dodgers. I guess you're a Dodgers fan, right? Because you are from LA, so you've got a team in this.
No. I actually was an Angel fan at the time, but right now, I'm living in Vermont, so I think I could take on the New York Yankees as my team. What do you think?
Well, they're close to elimination, are they not? I haven't really followed them, but they did beat the Red Sox.
Boston. Yeah.
All right, well, go Yankees.
So I could switch around with my affiliations.
I used to be a big Yankees fan, but I left them when I moved to California, and I never went back. All right, Arlen, it's great to talk to you, and I look forward to doing this all over again Tuesday coming up. That would be, let me do my math, the 14th of October. Thanks for coming on board. Really appreciate your generosity of time.
Thank you, Hal. I appreciate it.
All right, and I want to thank all the viewers for being part of Halitics. I will be back tomorrow for yet another edition.
Hal, can I talk now?
We're still on.